Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back to the EPIC Symposium. Hope you all had a wonderful first day. We are going to get straight into substantive conversations here at this year's EPIC Symposium with a fantastic conversation about the partnership between California state agencies and the federal government, in particular the CEC, of course, and the US Advanced Research Projects Agency on Energy, ARPA-E. So right back when the EPIC was conceived in 2012, the California Energy Commission started working with the ARPA-E, the Advanced Research Program for Agency on Energy, as it's known. So they've coordinated funding and information sharing, which has resulted over that decade or so in more than $160 million of direct funding to 30 Californian companies and something like $1.7 billion in private investments following on into the state, crowded in, as it were, creating more than 1,000 new jobs here in California. In May this year, in 2023, ARPA-E and the CEC solidified that partnership through a signed MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, that has identified priority areas of cooperation and methods to pursue common objectives to advance technologies that reduce energy costs, enhance grid reliability and resiliency, and mitigate environmental impacts of how we generate, deliver, and use our energy. This session is going to dig into all that, the good meat of that MOU, and how these priority areas and common objectives will come to work together. And we're going to highlight some success stories from the ongoing partnership between the state and federal governments. And to do that, we've got an incredible panel, not just of representatives from those two agencies, but also partners and beneficiaries of that. So to introduce them, and then I'll actually get them to say some words, we've got Dr. Evelyn Wang. It's a great privilege to be here in DC, where I'm recording this from, with the director of ARPA-E. We also have Commissioner McAllister, Dr. Andrew McAllister, who's the commissioner at the California Energy Commission, particularly on point with energy efficiency technologies and such. We are joined by Fernando Valera, who's the Director of Advanced Technology, Clean Technology at SDG&E, our utility partner in San Diego Gas and Electric. And to speak for startups in the mix, the technologists and entrepreneurs bringing it, Arjun Saroya, the new CEO at SkyCool Technologies, who, as you'll hear about, have benefited from both ARPA-E and CEC over the years. Before we get into any of that background and some of those stories, I actually want to just get each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us about one great technology or project that you've seen lifted up by these programs that we're going to talk about today. Director Wang, would you like to start, please?
Sure. First, thanks very much, Danny, for the kind introduction. It's really great to be on this panel today. So I'm Evelyn Wang. As Danny mentioned, I am the director of ARPA-E. ARPA-E stands for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy. And what we do here is we support high-risk, high-reward, transformational energy projects. And the whole idea is to support these projects so that they are early stage technologies that we're supporting. So we want to sufficiently de-risk them so that the private sector will start to invest. And I think often there are these private-public partnerships that are very critical. And this is why we're so excited to be here today to commemorate the MOU and the collaboration with the CEC.
Do you have any specifics that you want to tell us about, the examples of projects you're in love with?
Sure. Thanks for the reminder. So at ARPA-E, we're always looking for technological white spaces. So we're always looking for, what are the gaps in technology areas? So if we can sufficiently bridge those gaps, then we can really transform a specific energy space. So some of the examples of the recent programs that we've launched are related to low emission iron and steel. We're also looking at how can we access potentially geological hydrogen from the subsurface, as well as how do you improve the energy density of batteries by 4x for heavy duty transport.
Fantastic. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those. But now, Dr. McAllister, can you welcome us as commissioner from the CEC for this day, but also tell us your favorite pet project? No, there are no favorites here, but
there are no pet projects. They're all full. Well, Danny, thanks very much. It's a really pleasure to be here. Dr. Wang just really want to highlight and elevate the partnership that we have. I think it's exemplary. Other states, and countries really would be, I think, would do well to copy our example, or and really take this national, state, or national, regional collaboration, and really that makes the public-private partnerships that come out of it even stronger. So I think the ecosystem that we're feeding collectively is already paying huge benefits. So we can talk about sort of some of those leveraging opportunities. Danny just mentioned, it's sort of a 10x sort of thing that we get out of this, and so it's really the public's best interest for the long term. We're going to talk about a bunch of technologies in the brief time that we have, but I just think at a high level, it's worth just really considering and valuing the fact that the reason we're funding this broad range of technologies is because of the urgency of climate change. The state has to put in place assertive, muscular policies with commensurate funding resources to move markets, and we've shown in California we can do that. And R&D is a key component of that process. We need to accelerate, and I think the ecosystem that the EPIC program and ARPA-E collectively have put in place and we're collaborating on, it does just hit very intentionally the barriers in any given technology as it goes from an idea through to mass commercialization. So I think we don't want to lose that point, because what we're doing here is really remarkable. So I'm, as Danny said, I'm Commissioner Andrew McAllister. I've been on the commission since 2012 and really focused on energy efficiency, buildings and appliances. And increasingly that relates to all sorts of issues across our electric grid and across our energy systems. It's all related. Load flexibility, and just really making sure that all of our end uses are good citizens of the grid. We're investing in many ways in that ecosystem, and that those new approaches that today in the digital era we're really able to harness and take advantage of. And so really looking forward to the conversation on technologies. I think I tend to veer off into those of you who know me, into nerddom a little bit here, but I really think that buildings are a key component of our clean energy transition. They're between a quarter and a third of all the emissions, depending on how you slice and dice. And so they really drive emissions, and therefore they have to be part of the solution. We also have a housing affordability crisis in California and many parts of the U.S. And so we've invested in a group of projects to look at advanced prefabricated zero carbon new construction, new homes. And so I'm super excited about the various technologies that are going to come out of that, and lots of other things to talk about, but I'll leave it there for now.
No, that's great. Housing in California is a big one, and doing it right is even better. So we'll come back to it again, I'm sure. But for now, moving right along to Fernando and our IOU, investor-owned utility partner with the EPIC program down in San Diego. As Director of Advanced Clean Technology, can you sort of introduce SDG&E's point of view and any great fun technology projects that you want to lift up in this opening?
Yeah, and it just similar to Evelyn and Commissioner McAllister, just really excited to be part of this. And just as a flavor for my group really focuses on clean technologies at SDG&E, such as energy storage, microgrids, as well as newer technologies kind of entering the mix in terms of hydrogen. In terms of the clean energy transition, it's happening right before our eyes. That's number one. And then two, it's such a significant transition that I think everyone is going to have a part to play, both the public and private sector. Now, while SDG&E hasn't received any ARPA-E funding to date, we've done a lot in terms of managing our EPIC program. We have a DOE CETO funding at our Borrego Springs microgrid. And then the Inflation Reduction Act has played a pretty significant role in what we've seen. So in terms of a great technology that we've supported this year, that's energy storage. I know the CEC is very interested in energy storage. The DOE is very interested in energy storage. But for SDG&E, we're going to deploy over 200 megawatts of utility-owned energy storage in 2023. all of which has been able to take advantage of the investment tax credit that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which in effect will lower the cost of these projects for our customers, which we view as a great thing.
Awesome. Energy storage, zero emission buildings, electrification of heavy duty trucking. We've had some good ones, but I know we've saved maybe the wackiest to last. Arjun Saroy, I want to bring you up on stage as our sample startup leader, the CEO of SkyCool, which is a technology I've come to know and love. And I'm going to let you brag on yourself because I think the audience should know a little bit about your technology. I don't have to get you to pick another unless you want to, but I imagine you want to explain SkyCool a bit and say a few opening words to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a CEO of SkyCool as of only 2 months ago. Eli and his team have really done all the heavy lifting, and going through the history of SkyCool's involvement with ARPA-E. I mean, it dates back to 2012, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. And it's really, really impressive to see. I come from the energy efficiency space. I helped build a company starting back in 2007, 2008, focused on commercial buildings. And so a lot of my experience comes there. I would say for me, my favorite project, other than SkyCool today, was the L Prize. I was starting our company when the L Prize was first launched. This is maybe not ARPA-E technically, I guess it's DOE in general, which launched the first sort of commercially viable LED light bulb that Philips put out there. I spent the next 15 years of my career riding the adoption curve up, trying to get the technology out into people's buildings sooner than later, and I think it's been a tremendous success. And that has created a spillover across the world where now we have reliable LED technology that you can just buy at a hardware store. I see something similar happening for SkyCool down the line as well. We are working on a technology that has obviously local implications on energy efficiency and energy resilience, but can have truly global impact, and that's something exciting to see, and something that cannot be possible without programs like ARPA-E.
A word on how it works, just because I don't want
Yeah,
to.
so yes, SkyCool's technology is at its core is a novel material that is at once reflective of 95% of incident solar radiation, but is at this and also is about 95% emissive in the infrared spectrum. And what that allows practically is for surfaces to be cold without any energy input. So we can achieve temperatures below ambient without any additional energy. And so you can use this sort of as a lever in various ways, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about them. Our first product is a panel product that is meant to drive energy efficiency and refrigeration in HVAC systems, but it can also be applied directly to vehicles, buildings, electronics equipment to avoid the need for mechanical cooling at all.
Pretty awesome next gen stuff, and as we'll get into, it's a great story of how federal and state collaboration supporting this technology, like the LED story you mentioned, which was really driven first by California setting mandates and standards, can have global implications and impact in the world, which is why we're here. So thank you all for the introductory words. I didn't say much to introduce myself, which I should, just to explain why I'm getting the privilege of moderating this. I am the CEO of New Energy Nexus, which runs programs around the world to support entrepreneurs with incubators, accelerators, and funds. In shorthand, we have the good fortune of running the California Energy Commission's CalSEED Fund, the California Sustainable Energy Entrepreneur Development Initiative, which also backed SkyCool after ARPA-E, but as an example of this sort of support program that we have federally and with state. We run the Cal Test Bed Initiative in California with the University of California and the CEC, and a bunch of other great work in California, in New York, and with the Department of Energy around lithium technologies currently through the Lithium Bridge public-private partnership. Hence my being here and getting to dig in with these wonderful people, and hopefully the audience at the symposium is feeling it, the excitement about working out how to make these complementary parts of government industrial strategy, which California has been very au fait with for a long time. And now that the federal government wants to play like that, it really kicking in time. I do have one question for the policy geeks. This is for our two directors of the government agencies, which is that in some ways, ARPA-E is known for its sort of focus on the high risk stuff, high risk, high reward research is probably how you would define it. But the EPIC funding that the CEC uses for much of this research and development is about demonstrable benefits to ratepayers, and it's a very solid, less experimental set of outcomes. How do you see these programs complementing each other, and how do you help make those interconnections while they're operating in parallel with slightly different risk appetites?
Evelyn, would you like to go first?
Great, maybe I'll.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure, I'll get started. So I think ARPA-E and CEC certainly have very synergistic goals and aligned goals that we are interested in supporting transformational energy innovation. And this is ultimately to enhance economic and energy security of both California and our nation as a whole. And I believe that the collaboration really accelerates the critical work that we need in terms of research, development, and demonstration, with the goal of ultimately deploying these technologies. I'll just say a little bit more about ARPA-E is that at ARPA-E, we always think about, of course, there are a lot of, often people will call them valleys of death. We like to think about them as mountains of opportunity to be able to develop transformational energy technologies. And ARPA-E does support this kind of early stage part of the whole value chain. And I mentioned earlier that the whole goal is that hopefully ARPA-E's work will have sufficiently de-risked the technologies so that others will start to invest. And this is where I believe that this really close collaboration and synergy with CEC comes into play, where we see that bearing fruits. And I think Arjun just spoke of an exciting example of that with SkyCool, where we've supported early stage the research that was necessary, and having CEC as a partner to help really propel it forward and to really start to show the demonstrations that are necessary. And also then coming back to ARPA-E, which I'll talk about later, which is a scale-up program that helps further scale up and mature further the research and development efforts to create new paths to market, right? To create those paths to market and help mature the technology. So I think there's really that synergy and the opportunity there that really is rooted from this strong collaboration that we have.
Thank you.
Could not agree more.
Yeah,
could not agree more. Thanks, Danny, and I appreciate Dr. Wang that sort of broad, sort of location, sort of explanation of the location of ARPA-E in the marketplace. I think actually there are parts of any given market that we cohabitate well. Like, it's not that there really need to be silos where ARPA-E does this and CEC, EPIC does that, but I think we complement each other extremely well. And very early stage, sort of basic research, that's DOE and ARPA-E, as we sort of move towards an inkling of sort of applied science, and then into sort of actual real world applications and business models. And I think we get in sort of early on in the development of an idea with small grants, the CalSeed grants, and then sort of proof of concept, Cal Test Bed, and then the bridge funding, and start to really get into commercialization. And I think along the way, absolutely, a startup as it matures can go back to ARPA-E for additional resources that sort of fit their needs. And so I think really that back and forth is super healthy, and partly depends on the market that evolves over time. You don't know everything when you start out, and you learn, and you go to the bucket of funding that's most appropriate. And I think as that for any given, just speaking generically, for any given technology, as you start to show success, then you can go figure out, okay, what investors might fit, what applications, what climate zones, what types of buildings. And as that emerges, I think both efforts, ARPA-E and EPIC, and in some cases, the sort of the gas side of things as well, might be brought to bear. So I think really the handshake is very, very firm and productive.
Yeah. lots of complementarity from your perch on the public side of this equation, but let's test that with our private sector friends. So just switching sides over to Fernando and Arjun, what do you see from SDG&E and SkyCool's seat, the impacts that this new flows of state and federal funding are creating, the opportunities, and whether they're working well together?
So maybe I'll start. We're starting to be approached by more and more entities looking to partner on these technologies, which we always welcome. I think as an investor-owned utility, the California Public Utility Commission regulates everything we do, and so I think finding vehicles to approach the CPUC, or in advance having these monies sort of allocated to allow us to take advantage of some of this funding is, I think, always helpful, and something we're looking to get better at. I would say the other thing that we're starting to see in the market, and this has really kind of come about from the ITC, is that we're starting to see more and more entities look to manufacture here in the US, or look to bring in US manufactured equipment so that they can take advantage of the 10% domestic content. And so that's something that we're starting to see. And as a utility, you see that as advantageous, because that takes out some of the logistical and timing challenges you see with some of these new technologies.
And how about from the entrepreneur trying to bring up something from zero to hero?
Yeah, I mean, for our part, I would say that the more recent developments on incentives are there. I think SkyCool is at a odd stage where there's been a shift in focus to storage and electrification. SkyCool has been historically squarely focused on efficiency, and then at the same time, there's a lot of federal funding coming down for, as Fernando mentioned, is for advanced manufacturing tax credits. We're not quite there to make that leap. And so we're caught at this in-between stage. I'm very hopeful, though, that as programs develop further downstream from the money set aside in the IRA, that we will see programs in energy efficiency for both commercial and residential that are going to be beneficial to SkyCool. We look for those. And I also feel hopeful that down the line, where the space that we're playing in, which is not just, I would say, decarbonization, but just direct resiliency for people and buildings, that there will be many more opportunities in the future. So,
yeah, might be some threads we want to pull on later on about the timing of programs and the length of duration of the focus and such from the market's point of view. But before we get to that, I do want just to hear your story a bit, or rather SkyCool's story. As you said, the founders been at this for a decade, almost exactly the length that ARPA-E's been around, and both ARPA-E and CEC funding has been critical to SkyCool scaling to the level it's at. And you can tell us which TRL and such you think you're at. But if you could just do that briefly, and as by telling the story, sort of give a flavor to the audience of how public funding affects the trajectory of a company, yours in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the number one thing on entrepreneurs' minds, especially those that are audacious enough to tackle hardware and clean tech, which are very difficult spaces, is that it's not crossing the chasm, it's crossing the chasms. There's many of them, and they come along at each stage of development. And in order to do that, you need to have programs like ARPA. You need to have local programs like the CEC who can help you commercialize. In addition to the funding that you might be able to get in the private markets. I mean, to date, SkyCool has probably raised a total of $16 million in funding, and half of that was non-dilutive. So to an entrepreneur, that is a very, very meaningful thing when they're going to tackle. It's a huge incentive for entrepreneurs to go and tackle these problems. When otherwise, and then historically, entrepreneurs end up giving up all of their equity to try to do these projects, and it's just not as much of an incentive. And so, I'm very grateful, and I know Eli and the team are very grateful. I can honestly say SkyCool would not be around without the funding that we received over the years. I mean, even going back to 2012, before SkyCool was an entity, so this was Ashwath Raman and Eli Goldstein at Stanford. applied for a concept grant, and they got a $50,000 grant. That enabled them to then prove out the work, go and subsequently get a $3 million grant in partnership with our manufacturing partner that allowed them to go out and do research and get their first paper published in Nature. And so going to 2017, when we actually formed an entity, we had this, we were familiar with the process, we knew how it works, and we're able to then look at how we can leverage funding as we grew. And so we are fortunate in that on a technology readiness perspective, we've always, once we had the basic concept and knew we could manufacture it, our technology readiness was pretty high. And so we're unique, I say, relative to others in that case. But that has given us the ability to then leverage scale up, which we have done, and that's transformational. It's being able to actually ride down the cost curve of manufacturing new products is a real problem, and we've been able to do that. I think we wish we could do more, and we're continuing to do more, but it's amazing that a program like that exists, and it's been very very flexible and really helpful in ramping up our manufacturing to be able to drive down costs.
Yep. Great. You didn't put a plug in there for CalSeed, which did give you some money in about 2019.
So CalSeed's, the CalSeed program, I look at a lot of these CEC programs as getting us to market. And so, when we're doing projects in California, we're a California-based company. California is the market for clean tech, and to be able to, again, going back to driving down costs, to avail of the incentives that are available at the state level, you need to understand the state ecosystem. You need to be able to make your product attractive. A huge cost I've seen many companies stumble on is just getting their projects M&V'd to the standard that the state requires in order to avail of the incentives that are out there. These systems are in place for a reason. They're annoying, but CEC grant funding was critical in allowing us to do this in a way that made the technology vettable by third parties. So,
and also why we subsequently set up CalTestBed exactly to do measurement verification with incredible third parties like the University of California testbeds for entrepreneurs other than yourself that needed that and weren't able to get the money from someone to pay for it. So yeah, all good points. Lots of topics you keep on raising that I want to come back to, but the parking lot or the bike rack is becoming full, as they say. We may not get to all these good things because I want to let SDG&E and Director Wang and Commissioner McAllister come back to the conversation. But thank you for the potted history of SkyCall. I'm sure we'll hear more from you. But switching sides again from the entrepreneur's point of view, who's there looking at government going, give us some of that large so we can take these technologies to market and save ourselves from ourselves with this climate thing. How are you thinking about the challenges of putting the money to work? All of you run programs of different sizes, the utilities, the CEC with EPIC funding, ARPA-E with federal dollars. What are the barriers to getting it out there in a good way, to dispersing money, but also putting it into the right places, the right companies at the right time? And I'll get Fernando, let's go in reverse order, please.
Sure. So EPIC is a program here in California that all three investor-owned utilities participate in, as well as the CEC. I would say EPIC for the IOUs is challenging in that we're really limited to funding pre-commercial demonstration projects, not necessarily R&D projects. So there's kind of a specific type of project that we really need. So that's kind of one barrier that we have. Also for SDG&E, we have a relatively small budget as compared to the other IOUs. Good thing though is for EPIC 4, which is going to be coming out, there's some flexibility into the type of projects that we can choose. And then once we've chosen a project, perhaps pivot if possible. So that I think that's been good, and that's something we'll see in EPIC 4, which is nice. I think SDG as a whole, we continue to be interested in research and development opportunities. I think the thing is just kind of marrying that with what programs are already eligible, and then if it's something new, how do we go to the California Public Utilities Commission and get that approval? I think that's the some of the barriers that we see with kind of dispersing public funds.
Okay, interesting. Commissioner McAllister, what barriers or challenges are keeping you up at night?
Well, first of all, let me just say I feel like we have a process that is just really battle tested and that works. So you'll see evidence of that, I think, in each program opportunity notice that goes out for any given topic area. Whether it's offshore wind or buildings or different types of end uses. And so if you're reading that document, look at all the T's and C's, you get a sense of what those barriers have been. There is a certain amount of accountability that we have to create through the process. And that, as I think, Arjun, you intimated, it's not easy to apply for one of these grants. And so, we really, I think our staff does an amazing job at helping and sort of defining the topics well, putting them in a logical sort of structure, and then being very clear and transparent about how the proposals that come in will be evaluated. But there's no getting around the fact that putting in a proposal is a lot of work, especially for a smallish firm that has a lot of things going on. And so I think that is certainly one barrier. We work with the Public Utilities Commission very closely on this program because, after all, it is funded by investor-owned utility ratepayers. And so rightly, the benefits need to accrue to those same ratepayers. And that's not always the same thing as carbon emissions. Obviously there's a lot of overlap, and in general, those are rowing in the same direction. But I think the sort of criteria for success are maybe narrower than we might as a society sort of optimally choose. And I think that's it's a balance that we have to find between really being accountable, counting those benefits, dotting all the I's and T's and making sure that it's bringing ratepayer benefits, but that also, looking in a very clear-eyed way at the benefits of each project, of each solicitation for helping us get to our climate goals. So I wouldn't necessarily characterize that as a barrier, but I just think it's a little bit of complexity and nuance that's there that has to be navigated.
Yeah. And Director Wang, what are things coming up for the federal government in terms of getting?
Sure. Maybe I'll give the perspective. I'll give the perspective from ARPA-E, where I mentioned we are always looking for technological white spaces and exploring transformational energy projects. And we know there are a lot of gaps and limits that we still need to address to be able to meet our nation's targets. So the questions that we always ask when we're selecting projects is, in particular, if it works, will it matter? And because we support a lot of early stage R&D, and in fact, about 50% of the research portfolio that we support originate from academics, I think they're often pretty good at answering the first part, if it works, right? They can address that, they can tackle that challenge. And I think the bigger hurdle is really, will it matter, right? And that's really figuring out, how do you actually commercialize the technology? How do you get the technology out to market? Mm-hmm. And that's something that we've been trying to address with our team. In fact, within ARPA-E, we have a unique function called Tech to Market Advisors. And the whole goal of this Tech to Market team is to work with our projects so they can help support that path to market, to help align the technologies to market needs and figure out what is that commercialization pathway. And we know it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. Every technology will be different. And we need to work with stakeholders, understand when the stakeholders are willing to support the technology, whether they're venture capitalists willing to invest, whether the state agencies willing to start to now take it on, right? Or whether they're commercial entities and customers that are willing to start to pick it up. And this is where I think it's really critical, being able to figure out a path, understand the capital stack that's necessary, and help our teams find that path such that we can really ultimately deploy these technologies at scale.
Very helpful. I love the "if it works, does it matter."
Can I jump in really quick with an observation? Yeah, thanks. So you mentioned or I guess Arjun mentioned your work on LED. Thank you for that. LED was a long road to get to where we are today, And California played a key role in making that happen. And I think it's illustrative to think about the comparison with the compact fluorescent and the LED. And we learned from that development with California was also, central to the development of the compact fluorescent, always in partnership with DOE. We learned to really focus on quality, and we apply that lesson to the LED and developed a minimum quality spec. And that really pushed the marketplace to go, rather than to a race to the bottom, we went to the top. And so we ended up with a marketplace that really delivered what consumers wanted. And I think that was really key to getting where we are, and to, banning the incandescent 2 years before that ban recently went nationwide, and California really opened up territory there. And I think that was that was possible because we very clearly identified the barriers, used a lot of experience with all the smart people across the state, the Lighting Technology Center at UC Davis and others, and just really developed, I think, a clear-eyed understanding of the barriers so that we could solve them and really get over into that commercialization space, get costs down, and get to where we are today, where you walk into any hardware store and you've got the world at your fingertips.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Director Wang, thanks for that sort of insight. Also, staying with you, wanted to talk a bit about money with about 10 minutes left here. Want to get down to brass tacks. We're trying to leverage private sector investment with these public funding programs from the state and federal governments. What do you think the gaps that the public sector investment has to address are, and what are gaps that you think need to be filled by other sources in the US energy transition?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I will say that, again, from ARPA-E, as I started off saying that we support early stage, high risk, high reward technologies, right? Transformational energy technologies. And I think the risk is really key here, because I think this is where the government plays a key role, where we don't know if the technology is going to work, right? It's too early stage. And so the government has a role to really, and ARPA-E really plays that role to really support that stage of tremendously risky technology. But that's what lends itself to the potential transformational nature if it can really work, right? So this is where, if we can sufficiently de-risk the technology, then hopefully we can get to a point by which then we can get the private sector, the investors, everyone else to really start to buy in and to really support the value chain to get it out to commercialization. And so I really see that the government plays that role, in particular with what we have been trying to support within our agency, and thinking about also longer term type investments, whereas not tomorrow necessarily you'll see this technology out, but we do need to think about a longer term future and how to really think about a sustainable path.
Yeah. And just jumping sides of the table again, as it were, not to set up a difference between you all, but so that the audience can see it from different people's shoes. For Fernando and Arjun, SkyCool, SDG&E, what do you see the same question? What are the gaps that public investment can help close from your point of view?
I'll start. I would say, anytime we're going to look at deploying some kind of new technology on our system, we really want to feel confident that it works, right? And so, to the extent that public investment can create sort of potentially larger scale demonstrations or demonstrations for a longer period of time, I think that would give utilities more confidence in deploying that into our system. And then I think another thing where public investment could help is, as we look to potentially partner on some of these new technologies, arm in arm approaching our regulator to say, hey, we think this is a value, we think there's merit, I think we can do this on an expedited basis. So support with our regulator would be another area where I think public investment could help close some gaps.
Yeah, for our part, look with startups, cash flow is king, right? So there's definitely areas where I think private investors and private entrepreneurs can come in and sort of help bridge the gap. There's some issues, obviously, when you're availing of grant funds, there's processes and timing issues. Grants don't always move at the speed of startups, right? And so private funding can definitely help come in there. It's always a balance using your equity financing versus to fund cash flow issues. It's not the best use of your funds, and so you try not to do it. But at the same time, you have these grants. It's just a matter of them coming through. I think another area, sort of maybe more a broader gap. I don't know how private funding can directly help, but as a company who's availed of the Scale Up program, as well as having seen the development of the huge offerings that the DOE Loan Office is developing now, there's definitely a gap between the scale of those two things. Scale Up has been able to afford us the ability to do, say, 20 projects, buy down the cost of those projects to be able to offer them at sort of what we hope to be market rate going forward. That's the intention. That's a wonderful thing. 20 projects is not going to bring us the cost down to then get us to the point where we're going to the loan office and applying for a loan. So a lot of those incentives, I think historically have come from the state, from utility funding, and through even state grants. And so, but that's a hairy process. It's difficult to get there, and a lot of times it's totally dependent on what the sort of flavor of the year or flavor of the program is at the state level. And so I think there could be definitely help there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, moving from money and the pointy end of the business to maybe a much bigger and more important thing, to finish up, probably just wanted to touch on the reality that the justice and equity of our programs has really become much more core to clean energy and climate funding in this country. The Justice 40 initiative at the federal level, California has long sort of been encouraged and taken leadership in that way. At New Energy Nexus, our CalSeed and CalTestBed teams pride themselves on a sort of equity in, equity out model of how they manage the grants to entrepreneurs. So tell us a little bit about that, Director Wang, how priorities have shifted and programs have evolved. Also, Commissioner McAllister, and how we can see justice coming through the programs. And Fernando, from SDG&E's point of view, what you're doing, and Arjun on the other end. Just let you all take a turn at talking through the equity issue and prominence of that matter.
Sure, I'll start. And certainly energy equity is really important and something we try to focus significantly on as we're trying to identify our technological white spaces and opportunities for technology development. I'll give you two examples of recent efforts, I think, that are working towards more energy equity. One is a program that we started called EVs for All. And the whole premise of this program is to be able to now make more affordable batteries for electric vehicles that also can be fast charging. And we know that 1/3 of the Americans actually don't have access to garages and ports to actually charge their vehicles. And so being able to also operate in cold climates where that becomes also a challenge for a lot of Americans. So developing technologies that can in fact be fast charging, work in cold climates, also low cost enough so that they could be sufficiently deployed. And so that's an effort that we've been pursuing in the recent past. Another is actually electrified aviation. We know in a lot of remote areas in the country that they don't have access to goods, medical supplies, transport of people to those regions. And so we've been supporting electrified aircraft technology so that we can potentially provide these kinds of services and needs for people that need it the most. And of course, that also has auxiliary benefits. We know that lead is a really challenging, toxic material for areas. Often it's in socially, economically more underprivileged areas. And so having these regional airports that are electrified are very important in that regard as well. And also just thinking about kind of the costs associated that we could potentially kind of mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, and also operational costs as well could be very valuable.
Yeah. Commissioner McAllister, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. justice really is sort of the lens through which we're looking at virtually all of our initiatives. The big equitable building decarbonization program, we're going to be pushing out $1 billion plus money, $1 billion plus dollars of resources out into disadvantaged communities across the state. So it's one example, but really across the board. And just a couple of examples I mentioned before, the program opportunity, the awards to advanced prefabricated zero carbon homes, the sort of the affordable modular, that part of the housing stock, we've just got to do better moving forward. Some of those technologies are appropriate for the affordable sector and others not, but we really are trying to be intentional about identifying where we can improve new construction on affordable, as opposed to our programs, which are mostly focused on existing buildings. So we're trying to cover the whole landscape really through an equity lens. There's a technology that we're supporting called Gradient, which is a sort of user installable window AC that's really advanced in a lot of ways, and it's portable and really does sort of address some of the equity challenges that we've seen. Retrofittable without perforations, and portable such that a renter can take it with them when they go, if that's sort of part of the rental model. So that we have high hopes for that technology, and there's some other similar technologies that are really getting into that space. And the last thing maybe I'd say is just energy burden is really central for about a third of our population in the state. In sort of the affordable sector, given some of the inequities we have here in California, it's not a small amount of people, it's really a significant chunk of the state's residents. And so we actually are doing a lot of sort of screening and analytical work to figure out how our programs can really not exacerbate the energy burden, but really try to be a solution in the low income sector, which is large. Finally, within our R&D division, we're doing a lot of air quality work. And so indoor air quality is a justice issue. And it's a corollary benefit of everything we're talking about with building energy efficiency and emissions reduction. So the electrification effort absolutely has a justice profile. And so our R&D really is trying to deepen our understanding of indoor air quality and the positive impacts and the healthcare benefits and just lots of broad benefits that we will see across our lower income parts of the state and residents.
Okay, I don't want to cut the conversation short, the very important topic, but if you would, gentlemen, want to sort of jump to the last question just to wrap up here because we're at time. I'm sure for the audience, they can contact Fernando and Arjun and Commissioner McAllister and Director Wang to continue these conversations. But just for you lot on screen while we record this, how are you going to collaborate more? How could you see collaboration more between startup and investor-owned utility for SkyCool and SDG&E? And then I'll come back to the two directors, the federal and state governments. But just thinking about this topic we've been talking about this morning, how could you collaborate more, Arjun, and then Fernando? Yeah,
so somebody who's built businesses on top of utility incentives and scaled them very large. I can tell you it's always a challenge sort of navigating how incentives can be used. And a lot of what I did sort of in my later years at Lime Energy was and the way I actually discovered SkyCool was sort of looking for technologies that I could fit into the existing program framework and get through the process and just make those incentives available, right? I had to do that work and it was for my benefit. I think utilities have done a good amount in that, especially in California. I think there's more work to be done there to streamline the ability for startups to be able to take advantage of these incentives. So
very cool. Yeah. I saw you nodding, Fernando.
Well, just very similar, early engagement so that we can each understand what programs are out there and, can be taken advantage of, I think would really help both parties and sort of leveraging the programs that are out there. The other thing I would add is just, I think, early engagement with the utilities and understanding what their core business is and what they're focused on, at least in California, obviously wildfire being one just example, right? But really understanding what the utilities are focused on, I think would also be useful.
Of course, yeah. Okay, and how could the CEC collaborate better with ARPA-E and vice versa?
Well, I think recently we've actually started getting together more intentionally, I think, and really sort of trying to cross-pollinate more actively. And I think that is because we've learned that that's going to be helpful, and I think it is. Navigating, keeping those relationships at all levels, including the staff level, really vital. That inoculates us against sort of the political winds, at state and federal levels and some of those differences. And I think that just is really just a savvy strategy to keep the ecosystem healthy. So I would just suggest that we keep doing that and even do it more.
Yeah. Dr. Wang, do you have any thoughts on the collaboration question?
So from our perspective, yeah, from our perspective, I'll say that, as a government agency, we see ourselves as a convener. So we convene people together and we want to bring everybody together because it truly is an all hands on deck moment where we need our government partners, we need our entrepreneurs, we need our stakeholders and the utilities. We need everybody to work together. An avenue for us to do that is we do hold an ARPA-E Energy Innovation Summit every year, where the goal is to bring everybody together that's excited about the energy innovation and technological advancements and to help each other, because we all need each other to help move and push technologies out the door. So I see that as an opportunity still to continue to engage and to actively engage with various mechanisms. And so that's why we're so excited to be here and to be with have the great partnerships that we have and continue to build more.
Amen to that. More collaboration, more convenings, and that's a great segue to wrap this up and hand it back over to the organizers of the EPIC Symposium. Really want to thank you all. I won't go through your names and titles again, but people can see them in the materials, and appreciate this. It'll be available online, I'm sure, because there was a lot there. And thank you for all your work. It's really important. As Dr. Wang just said, this is the time we're going to be doing more of this better. Thanks.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.